and North Vietnam also supplied 50,000 of its own troops at the height of the war. Another secret operation was the massive bombardment of the country by American planes. From bases in Thailand, huge B-52s flew up to 300 sorties a day against suspected communist positions. With an elusive enemy hidden by miles of jungle, it was impossible to bomb accurately. Many innocent villagers were undoubtedly killed or made homeless by the raids. Washington never admitted the scale of the bombing, nor permitted film coverage of it. The only pictures released were those showing rice supplies being dropped to refugees. Early in 1973, with America's withdrawal from Vietnam complete, another agreement was reached over the future of Laos. By now, the Pathet Lao controlled much more territory, and they agreed to come back into the government as equal partners in a neutralist government. The new cabinet was finally announced in April 1974. Prince Suphanuvong didn't take a ministerial post. Instead, he became head of a national political council, whose job was to frame a new constitution. From this new position of strength, the communists were well placed to advance the revolution by political rather than military methods. But there were also pressing economic and social problems to tackle. The most important concerned the refugees. Both Pathet Lao and royalist officials toured refugee camps to explain government plans for resettlement and rehabilitation. The war had uprooted nearly 800,000 people, over a quarter of the entire population, and many had settled around Vientiane to escape the fighting. Now they were told they had a choice: to settle where they were or return, with the government's help, to their own villages. In a scheme organized by the United Nations last February, the first batch of 11,000 chose to return to their homes in communist-held territory in the north. For many who made the trip, the move meant a reunion with relatives and friends they'd not seen for 10 years or more. The decision to share power was expressed not just in the cabinet room, but also on the streets of Vientiane, where Pathet Lao and royalist troops kept law and order through joint patrols. The ceasefire agreement also controlled the number of soldiers each side could keep in the capital and other large towns. But what's agreed in Laos is rarely what's carried out, and sporadic outbursts of fighting continued to disturb the general peace. The Mio tribesmen especially weren't happy with the ceasefire and tried to improve their position. But they found little support from other royalist troops, some of whom refused to obey their officers and declared themselves allies of the Pathet Lao. Matters came to a head last May, when whole units of the royalist army mutinied after the Mios had been defeated and their commander had fled to Thailand. In Vientiane, Pathet Lao students demonstrated against right-wing elements and forced the resignation of all 5 royalist ministers. From this point on, the government ceased to be neutralist except in name. Pathet Lao policies were adopted unopposed. The most obvious change introduced by the communists was the political seminar, which everyone from peasant to cabinet minister was obliged to attend. The sessions were conducted by trained propaganda officials and participants were often required to repeat various written statements of Marxist ideology. This attempt to remodel and discipline society is taken very seriously by the Pathet Lao, and severe penalties, including jail sentences, have been imposed on those who've refused to attend. Faced with a choice between indoctrination or exile, many chose to leave. In the last 6 months, 50,000 people, including teachers, doctors and businessmen, have sold what they can and taken the ferries across the Mekong to Thailand. These professional people may be able to find a secure future in Thailand, but there are already 30,000 refugees from Laos living in camps across the Mekong, many of them Mio tribesmen who've no skills and who depend on welfare from the Thai government. In Vientiane, nearly every street in the shopping district shows some sign of the exodus. Meanwhile, the emergence of the new regime in Laos has created tensions along the Mekong, which forms the border with Thailand for much of its length. The new government has asked Thailand to repatriate all Laotian refugees, but the only things to have been exchanged so far are bullets. Patrol boats from both sides have been involved in skirmishes, and Vientiane has even accused Bangkok of bombing raids on Laotian territory. The Thais responded to all this by closing the land frontier in November. Since 85% of all Laos's fuel and food comes from or through Thailand, this has had a serious effect on the economy. Many garages have closed down, and taxi drivers are out of business, at least for the moment. And in the marketplace, food has become very scarce. In a country where the average income barely equals $50 American a year, these recent problems are a heavy extra burden. Inflation, which was 60% a year during the war, is now running at 70%. Some goods have come down in price recently, as foreign businessmen have sold off their stock prior to leaving. But the foreign community never catered for the average Laotian anyway, so these benefits have not been widely felt. The abolition of the monarchy and the official communist takeover has been received calmly, but with a few mixed feelings. The suddenness of the move and the feeling of general uncertainty about the future has cast an air of uneasiness over Vientiane, normally a relaxed and informal city. But the new regime has refrained from any ruthless demonstrations of power, such as the executions that happened in Cambodia. The American embassy is still open here, the only one in Indochina, though its staff numbers only 22, compared with the 1,200 who were here a year ago.